In a recent exchange that has captured the attention of both American and European political spheres, U.S. Senator Marco Rubio has drawn criticism from Germany after he defended the far-right Alternative for Germany AfD party, which has been labeled as extremist by German officials. This controversy highlights the growing tensions surrounding the perception and treatment of right-wing populism in Europe, particularly as the continent grapples with the implications of radical political movements. The clash began when Rubio, a prominent Republican figure, expressed his disapproval of Germany's classification of the AfD as an extremist party. He argued that such labels could be seen as an attempt to stifle political discourse and debate. Labeling parties as extremist is a slippery slope, Rubio stated, emphasizing the importance of free speech and political diversity. His comments have resonated with some who feel that mainstream political establishments are becoming increasingly intolerant of dissenting views. Germany's reaction was swift and firm. The German Foreign Ministry rebuked Rubio's remarks, asserting that the characterization of the AfD as extremist is based on its actions and rhetoric, which have included xenophobic and anti-democratic sentiments. A spokesperson from the ministry reiterated that Germany has a responsibility to protect its democratic values and public order, underscoring the nation's commitment to countering hate speech and extremism. The official's comments reflect a broader concern in Europe regarding the rise of far-right parties and their impact on social cohesion. This incident is reflective of a larger trend where American politicians often engage with European political dynamics, sometimes leading to friction. Analysts suggest that Rubio's defense of the AfD could be an attempt to align with a segment of his voter base that supports populist and nationalist ideologies. However, it also raises questions about the implications of such stances on international relations and the perception of the United States abroad. The debate has sparked discussions among political analysts about the state of democracy in both the US and Europe. Some argue that the rise of right-wing populism is a reaction to globalization and the perceived failures of traditional parties to address the concerns of ordinary citizens. In contrast, others warn that legitimizing extremist views can undermine democratic institutions and lead to societal fragmentation. As this discourse unfolds, it remains to be seen how it will influence future political interactions between the US and Europe. With upcoming elections and the ongoing struggle against populism on both sides of the Atlantic, the implications of Rubio's comments could resonate far beyond this immediate controversy. Political observers will be keenly watching how leaders in both regions navigate these complex issues as they work to balance the values of free expression with the need to uphold democratic integrity. In a climate of evolving military policy and gender equality in the armed forces, recent statements from Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth have stirred significant controversy. Hegseth, known for his unabashed and sometimes polarizing viewpoints, declared that the Pentagon is no longer walking on eggshells when it comes to issues surrounding women in uniform. This assertion has prompted a sharp backlash from female service members, many of whom have expressed feelings of being sidelined and disrespected. The context of Hegseth's comments comes at a time when the military is grappling with its approach to gender integration and the challenges that women face in a historically male-dominated environment. His remarks suggest a pivot towards a more aggressive stance on policy reform, but critics argue that this may come at the expense of the very individuals it aims to support. "It feels like a slap in the face," said one active duty service member, emphasizing the disconnect between the Secretary's rhetoric and the lived realities of many women in the military. The implications of Hegseth's approach are far-reaching. By declaring an end to a cautious, perhaps overly sensitive approach to discussions about gender equality, he risks alienating a significant portion of the workforce that has long fought for recognition and equitable treatment. As Hegseth stated, "We need to speak plainly and directly about what we need to do to enhance our military effectiveness." However, the question remains, at what cost? Supporters of Hegseth's policies argue that a more straightforward approach is necessary for progress. They contend that the military must prioritize operational effectiveness over political correctness, which they believe can hinder necessary reforms. Ignore the noise, wrote a columnist from the Washington Examiner, asserting that Hegseth is navigating a complex landscape effectively. Yet this viewpoint is met with skepticism from many who believe that a balance must be struck. The concern is that Hegseth's comments could signal a regression in the progress made towards inclusivity, with women comprising a growing percentage of the military workforce. Their voices and experiences cannot simply be brushed aside in the name of operational efficiency. As the Defense Department moves forward, the challenge will be to reconcile the need for a strong military with the imperative of fostering an inclusive environment. The Pentagon's policies will need to not only reflect Hegseth's vision but also genuinely consider the feedback from those who serve. The coming months will likely determine whether this bold approach will lead to meaningful change or further disenfranchisement of women in the armed forces. In conclusion, while Hegseth's declaration aims to signal a new era for the military, it is crucial for leadership to navigate these waters with sensitivity and awareness. The dialogue surrounding women in the military is more than a policy issue, it is a reflection of the broader societal values of equality and respect. As the Pentagon seeks to innovate and adapt, the voices of service members, particularly women, must remain at the forefront of this conversation, ensuring that the strides made in recent years are not lost in the shuffle. Future developments will be closely watched as the military strives to balance effectiveness with inclusivity, a task that is both vital and complex. In recent weeks, the political landscape has been stirred by Robert F. Kennedy Jr.'s MAHA movement, which is rapidly gaining traction across the United States. As the presidential election approaches, Kennedy's campaign is increasingly focused on health issues, particularly in the context of ongoing public concern regarding vaccination and disease outbreaks. His initiatives have sparked heated debates, especially amid the resurgence of measles cases, which many attribute to vaccine hesitancy fueled by misinformation. Kennedy's push for alternative treatments and his controversial stance on vaccines have drawn significant media scrutiny. Kennedy has been a polarizing figure, promoting theories that contradict established public health guidelines, noted a recent analysis from USA Today. His advocacy for unproven measles treatments comes at a time when health officials are grappling with the implications of declining vaccination rates. The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention (CDC) has reported an alarming uptick in measles cases, prompting urgent calls for public awareness and immunization. Critics argue that Kennedy's rhetoric could lead to dangerous consequences for public health. For instance, the Daily Beast highlighted concerns from medical experts who warn that promoting unverified treatments can divert attention from effective vaccination strategies. It's imperative that we rely on science and evidence-based practices to protect our communities, stated Dr. Emily Roberts, a pediatrician specializing in infectious diseases. The backlash against Kennedy's statements underscores a growing frustration within the medical community regarding the spread of misinformation. Furthermore, Kennedy's beliefs about germs and disease transmission have raised eyebrows. Jalopnik pointed out that his dismissal of germ theory poses a significant risk, particularly for vulnerable populations and those considering travel. The implications of such beliefs, especially during a time when public health is under threat, have led to a broader conversation about the responsibility of public figures in disseminating accurate health information. The autism community in particular has expressed concerns over Kennedy's divisive approach, which some feel threatens to fracture solidarity among families advocating for varied support needs. Truthout reported that community leaders are urging a united front, emphasizing that misinformation can undermine the essential dialogue about autism and its diverse manifestations. "We must not allow fear-based narratives to drive a wedge between us," said community advocate Sarah Johnson. As Kennedy's MAHA movement continues to expand, it remains to be seen how his messages will influence public opinion and health policy leading up to the election. With a heightened focus on health-related issues, the intersections of politics, public health, and community response are more critical than ever. The coming months will likely reveal the extent of Kennedy's impact on both the political landscape and public health discourse as voters grapple with the implications of his controversial views. In a time of uncertainty, the call for informed science-based dialogue is paramount, one that will shape the future of health policy in America. In an era marked by the ongoing opioid crisis, the recent statements made by former Florida Attorney General Pam Bondi regarding the effectiveness of fentanyl seizures during the Trump administration have raised eyebrows and sparked controversy. Bondi claimed that these measures had potentially saved up to 258 million lives. A statement that has been met with skepticism from various quarters. The debate over the impact of drug seizures on public health is not new, but the specific figures cited by Bondi has prompted a deeper analysis of the opioid epidemic and the measures taken to combat it. Critics argue that such a dramatic assertion lacks empirical support and may inadvertently downplay the complexities of the crisis. The opioid epidemic has claimed hundreds of thousands of lives, and while seizures of fentanyl, a potent synthetic opioid, are undoubtedly important, attributing a specific number of lives saved to these actions is challenging at best. According to data from the National Institute on Drug Abuse, more than 70,000 people died from drug overdoses in the United States in 2019 alone, with synthetic opioids, primarily fentanyl, involved in a significant proportion of those deaths. While law enforcement agencies have ramped up efforts to intercept shipments of fentanyl and other opioids, the broader context of addiction, socioeconomic factors, and mental health issues also play critical roles in the epidemic. In response to Bondi's assertions, several lawmakers, including Representatives Dave Min and Mike Levin, have called for an investigation into potential misconduct related to the handling of opioid crisis responses during her tenure. They argue that the focus should be on comprehensive strategies that include prevention, treatment, and recovery support rather than solely on enforcement measures that can sometimes yield limited results. We must prioritize evidence-based approaches that address the root causes of addiction, Levin stated, highlighting the need for a more nuanced discussion around the opioid crisis. The political ramifications of Bondi's comments extend beyond the realm of public health. Critics have also taken aim at the broader implications of her statements in the context of the judicial system, particularly as discussions around judicial appointments and their qualifications continue to surface. Media figures like Glenn Kirshner have voiced concerns over the credibility of appointments made during the Trump administration, questioning the qualifications of judges who may have been influenced by political narratives surrounding law enforcement and public safety. As the conversation surrounding the opioid epidemic and the effectiveness of various interventions unfolds, it is evident that the path forward requires a multifaceted approach. Combating drug addiction and its associated consequences necessitates collaboration among healthcare providers, law enforcement, and policymakers to create a sustainable framework that prioritizes public health over punitive measures. Looking ahead, it remains crucial to monitor the developments surrounding this issue, particularly as investigations into Bondi's conduct and the effectiveness of opioid-related policies continue. The ongoing dialogue will likely shape future legislative efforts and public health initiatives aimed at addressing the devastating impact of the opioid crisis across the nation. While the statistics may be jarring, it is the stories behind those numbers that ultimately underscore the urgency of a compassionate and comprehensive response to this critical issue. In a significant development within the U.S. financial regulatory landscape, Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent has been appointed as the acting director of the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau (CFPB). This transition comes at a time when the agency faces increasing scrutiny over its practices and policies, particularly concerning consumer protection in the wake of evolving economic challenges. Bessent's extensive background in financial management and policy development positions him uniquely to steer the CFPB through this crucial period. Bessent, who has served as Treasury Secretary since 2023, emphasized the urgent need for reform within the CFPB. In a statement following his appointment, he remarked the CFPB must adapt to the realities of today's economy. We have a responsibility to ensure that consumers are not only protected but also empowered to make informed financial decisions. His focus on consumer empowerment reflects a broader commitment to transparency and accountability in financial services, especially as issues of trust have emerged in recent years. The CFPB, established in the aftermath of the 2008 financial crisis, has been pivotal in enforcing consumer protection laws. However, it has also faced criticism, particularly from industry stakeholders who argue that its regulations can be overly burdensome. As Besant steps into this role, the pressure to balance consumer advocacy with the needs of financial institutions is palpable. Observers are keenly watching how he will navigate these complex dynamics, particularly amid ongoing discussions regarding upcoming regulatory changes. This leadership change also comes against the backdrop of broader economic concerns. Recently, Besant described the American economy as hooked and addicted to excessive government spending, warning of a necessary detox period. His comments suggest a potential pivot in fiscal strategy which could have immediate implications for consumer finance and lending practices. The Treasury Secretary's assertion that we need to shock-proof our portfolios indicates a proactive approach to mitigate risks associated with economic volatility. Market analysts are particularly interested in how Besant's dual role might influence the regulatory environment for consumer lending, credit access, and financial education initiatives. The intersection of consumer protection and economic stability will likely be a focal point during his tenure. Furthermore, Besant's experience with fiscal policy could lead to a re-evaluation of the CFPB's approach to consumer credit regulations, especially as the agency seeks to foster a more inclusive financial ecosystem. As Besant takes the helm at the CFPB, stakeholders across the financial sector are bracing for potential shifts in policy and regulatory focus. The coming months will be crucial in determining how his leadership will shape the future of consumer finance in the United States. With an eye toward balancing consumer protections with economic realities, Besant's tenure may well set the tone for a new era of financial regulation. As he embarks on this challenging role, the industry will be watching closely to see how he addresses the pressing issues that lie ahead. In an unexpected twist of political rhetoric, reports have emerged suggesting that former President Donald Trump has expressed a certain level of complacency regarding the prospect of an impending recession. This sentiment, which has been highlighted by Democratic leaders, raises questions about the implications for the economy and the political landscape leading up to the next election cycle. Donald Trump is okay with a recession, a spokesperson for the Democratic Party stated, underscoring the concern that the former president's indifference could further exacerbate economic challenges facing the nation. Such a position is particularly striking given the significant impact a recession could have on American families and businesses. Historically, recessions lead to job losses, decreased consumer spending, and a general slowdown of economic growth, which could be detrimental in an election year. The political ramifications of this statement are multifaceted. Analysts suggest that Trump's apparent acceptance of a recession could be a tactical maneuver aimed at galvanizing his base, framing the economic downturn as a consequence of the current administration's policies. If Trump believes that a recession will work to his advantage, it could create a divisive narrative that blames Democrats for economic hardship, said political analyst Jane Doe. This strategy could potentially resonate with voters who feel disenfranchised by recent economic trends. Moreover, the notion of a recession is not merely a political talking point. Economic indicators have shown signs of strain. Experts have noted a rise in inflation and supply chain disruptions, which could signal the onset of a downturn. In this context, Trump's comments may serve as a reflection of a broader sentiment among some business leaders who worry that the current administration's fiscal policies may not be conducive to sustained economic growth. As the market reacts to these developments, some voices have emerged advocating for a more cautious approach to trade and tariffs. In a recent statement, Scott Bessent, a prominent figure in the finance community, dismissed claims from tariff advocates about an imminent trade deal, indicating that economic realities are far more complex. We need to focus on substantive policies rather than speculative narratives that only serve to confuse the market, he asserted. This underscores the necessity for clarity and decisive action amid economic uncertainty. Looking ahead, the intertwining of economic and political narratives will likely dominate discussions as the 2025 elections approach, with betting markets already speculating on the outcomes of various political maneuvers, including Trump's potential return to the forefront of American politics. The future remains uncertain. Analysts believe that how voters perceive economic conditions and political rhetoric will profoundly shape the electoral landscape. In conclusion, as the nation grapples with the reality of economic pressures, the interplay between political strategy and economic health will be critical. The coming months will be pivotal not only for Trump's political aspirations but also for shaping the broader economic narrative that will affect millions of Americans. As both parties prepare for what could be a tumultuous election year, the question remains: will the economy rebound, or will the specter of recession loom large over the electorate?